Welcome back to another episode of the Women in Whiskey series on the Whiskey Lifestyle. I am your host, Rashawn Hall, and this week we have another great episode for you. I have the fortune and privilege of have known this person through kind of my travels in the whiskey space, particularly in bourbon in Kentucky. I affectionately just called her the Baroness of Bourbon. She's also been called the Palate Princess. So let's welcome in Kymberli Douglas. Kim, how are you?
Hey, what's up? What's up?
So yeah, I guess, first off, since you have such titles that we've decided to give you as, or others have decided to give you as, Baroness of Bourbon and the Palate Princess. Let's start. How did you get into whiskey?
So it was something that like I've always kind of been wanting to get into. Being in Kentucky, I wanted to, my friend suggested maybe I get involved with one of the clubs. There was a club in Louisville that I tried to reach out to, but it was around, COVID. I guess maybe people weren't accepting new members. And so he suggested that I reached out to a group that he kind of is with in New York, because he's out of New York, and it was Taste, Select, Repeat. So I kind of did a back and forth with them, and it kind of just took off from there. I had some mutual interests as far as music industry stuff, and it just seemed to kind of align with just, where my interests were. And I mean, from there, just, Zooms and just, my knowledge base. And also I have like a chemistry, school background. So spirits kind of just are very interesting to me. So.
Okay. But I would assume before that, you didn't just jump in. I mean, someone suggested clubs. You had a palate, you had an acumen for spirits. You're from Kentucky. Tell us a little bit about how you were introduced. As I feel like every Kentuckian or person in that area has their own story about how they were first introduced to
oh yeah,
finest product. How did you get into bourbon? What was that first experiencing bourbon? What was that?
So one of my best friends, we were actually a lot more into beer. So we were in this little group called the Lexington Beer Aficionados, and she was just like, maybe, have you tried like Makers or, any other ones? And I said, the only ones I had really tried at the time were like, Old Granddad and, a lot of people's, kind of first. And so she kind of got me into starting to do Makers, and we started going to these bourbon dinners. They would have these little events. So Old Forester went to an Old Forester event. And from there, we talked to, one of the guys, and they would invite us out to a Woodford event, and Weta Michael is one of the big restaurateurs in Lexington. So when she's the in-house chef for Woodford, so we started going to, and I felt like kind of recognizing this, the spices and the taste and the flavors, and kind of being able to identify different, what my palate was, really liking. And then one of our friends lives in Bardstown, and I went down there, and it was a different story. I mean, Heaven Hill, I kind of fell in love with like Heaven Hill. So my favorite daily drinker is actually a Heaven Hill 6-year green label, the Kentucky only distribution. So that's kind of set that off.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Just dropping exclusives already. All right. The things that everyone can get. Fair enough. Okay. So you started in as a consumer, like you made that graduation. What was it like just even before we get back to you started to do barrel picks and working with Taste, Select, Repeat? What was it like being a woman in these spaces? I don't want to assume, but I know we've had conversations, offline about that. What was it like getting into this space, and tasting whiskeys or even beer? I feel like that even that's a space that people might stereotype in a particular way.
Well, it was very interesting. I think just coming into a lot of those spaces, being like a young Black woman, it wasn't many of us I would see at the events and bumping into people. I live, the area I live in, there is an HBCU here, but, Buffalo Trace is down the street, and you just don't, see a lot of brown besides the liquor. So it was just, so it was, something, like I said, something interesting. And then I would start noticing people that would recognize, me and, and then if my friend was going, like, recognize us from attending the events. And so, we were getting invited to something else. We were getting invited to something else. And so that just, like, right there, I was just like, I really, like this. I like this space. But primarily I was working in healthcare, and, it kind of seemed more of, just like a hobby at the time. But yeah.
And do you think it's is it becoming less of a hobby? I feel like there was a little hint there. Are you looking to pursue this more professionally? I know this is a passion of yours.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely like interested in, like, this just in more of that space. And it is a hard industry to try to crack into if you don't have either a certain network or connections, or the network connections that work for other people. But it is something that I've been pursuing. I've applied to a few things, but definitely still trying to figure out my way to get into something a little more, permanent. But I do have fun with doing the barrel picks. I was even asked to do one recently with the Air Force, Air Command Wing. Just somebody that I taught a barrel camp in New York. And one of the guys on the team that he was put on my team, he just said, "Hey, I know my coach was in Kentucky, and she'll be glad to come up if it works with her schedule." And so I did a pick with them for New Riff, actually. So that was cool.
And what is that experience for people who have not been on a barrel pick? Describe what that barrel pick process is like.
Okay. So most of my picks have been with a group called Taste, Select, Repeat, which I feel like that's where a lot of people, have known me from. But that experience of going to the distillery, a lot of places you go to, it starts with maybe a tour of their facility, sometimes a little more in depth. Depending on the distillery, you kind of get an idea of where you want your barrels to come from in the rick house, because everybody wants that kind of like that honey barrel. And the barrels are rolled out to you guys. It's set up in like a standard like sensory process, and with the glasses, and you're kind of thieving directly from the barrel, but you're also getting things proofed down, tasting it, kind of being able to fill out what the flavors that you're detecting, and how it's going to work, and if it's going to be something that will be, kind of knock people's socks off. There's some things that you can get in your comfort zone with, but you want something that people will say, that bottle from them, that one, So that's what you kind of tend to look for. We don't discuss what we're feeling at the time until it's just time to say, hey, what do we want to eliminate? Just to not influence each other. And so.
Okay. And what do you look for? What is there? Do you have specific keys? Are there things that go off, like, do you have a checklist, if you will?
I do. So okay. I am a rye girl. I love a good rye. So when I can get like a spice note, and it's a particular note, I can always feel like I can detect like anise. But rye is like rye spice, like that kind of is a zinger for me. So when I can get that with like maybe just, just a little sweet, the heat, I do like the heat, but it definitely, like, the spice note for me is awesome. But in anything like with subtle fruit, cherry just seems to be like something that, it isn't too bitter for me, but I'm not into like too fruity things. So those are things that kind of set alarms off for me in my preference.
Okay. So I have to also imagine that in doing this and in being in this world, and, you're on social media, that people come to you or reach out to and say, hey, I want to get into this space. Or I'm sure there are women who may feel more comfortable with coming to you and say, hey, I want to try something. Where do I start? How do you recommend? I know it's something, that we all get asked, and it's something I ask often to my guests. How do you tell people in terms of starting their journey in, whether it's whiskey or bourbon specifically?
So I do get asked that a lot. I do get asked, if you could send me a list of, 10 bourbons to try or kind of, prime their palate on. I would always say, starting with a good Heaven Hill product, just out of my preference,
Mm-hmm.
is always kind of a good way to start. Just some of the basics. My my favorite go-to to tell people here lately, probably the last 3 years though, it's been actually like an NDP. It's Smoke Wagon, uncut, unfiltered.
Okay.
Some of their early, I still have some of their early batches in the 30s and 40s. So those are some of the ones that I always say, like, Smoke Wagon, a Heaven Hill product, Buffalo Trace, some of their, the general ones. You don't have to go. Antique 107 is a cool weeded, but yeah, just some of the basic stuff before you start getting into trying to think you need to have like some of the more allocated, expensive items, start there and, start seeing what you like and, kind of prime your palate to see what spices you like. Cause some people immediately be like, I don't like rye. And I'm like, you just haven't had the right one.
Absolutely. And interesting enough, you mentioned, so when you started really getting into bourbon, you were in the healthcare industry. You have now switched industries to an industry that's also very busy and time consuming. You can explain to people what it is you do now and how do you balance the whiskey world with that world? I mean, I think there's some upsides, which I know, but
it definitely is. It definitely is. So yeah, and I've been like having this content creator kind of fear, but I think I'll probably use my primary job for more of that. But I'm a flight attendant now, and being a flight attendant, I try to base a lot of my trips on going different places that either I haven't been, and going to places that, find a good bar, a good speakeasy to go to and try different things. And, company paid hotel, we get, our layovers have to be a minimal amount of time, which usually coincides with our drinking limit. So, I'm always safe that way, but definitely, I get my time in New York. I've been to some good places. I'm in some Rhode Island speakeasy. So I try to line that up, but I love being a flight attendant. I'm having a good time with it.
Okay. I mean, no, I I follow, so I see the travels all the time. So what is there, or you mentioned Rhode Island for a speakeasy, is there a whiskey from another state that you try, whether it's doing picks or just, in your travels as a Kentuckian, you're like, oh, I know it's not Kentucky. It's not the traditional or, the OG, but this was, surprisingly amazing. This was amazing, and I love it.
Okay. So, one I tried, I don't know. And I keep coming back to it to try to see if I love it, but I like it, is the J. Rieger, Kansas City whiskey. So that's one that, I was out there. I've been to Kansas City a few times and, visit their distillery, but, the one particular time I was just there for the, Monday night football game with the Eagles. And I got to talk to the lady that runs their program, talked to Elizabeth. I talked to one of the tour guides there. And I was able to get some tastings of some products. And I was like, it totally surprised me. They found some writing in the bottled and bond law where it allows them to put a certain percentage of sherry in their bourbon. So it gives it a little different taste. So it's definitely, so J. Rieger out of Kansas City, Missouri was a surprise. Definitely.
Okay. Very cool. And what else? I mean, you have your picks behind you there. I'm not going to ask you to pick a favorite child, but as you know, I see the display. We love a display in the background. As you went through those picks, I know a lot of them are TSR. As you went through those picks, or I think majority TSR, what is there a bottle that is significant, not for what's in the bottle, but for the experience that you all had picking it?
Okay, so yeah, so I would say probably my Old Forester Women's History pick. The this one, the experience was amazing. I got to do this pick with Melissa Riff, who is the master taster of Old Forester. Now she took over after Jackie Zakan, which I think you may be interviewed as well. It had Sherry Carter from Oak Carter Whiskey on it, Nancy Bond from Brown Foreman, and of course Jess Ann Zemlick, who's, we all know is amazing. And Katie out of the Kennedy Bar in Pensacola, Florida, who I guess she does a lot of Willet picks as well. But she's an entrepreneur. So it was just that pick right there. I mean, I felt like I was in like a school, like listening, just soaking up the game from these veteran women, and, here I am, like, I felt like, I'm honored to be here, but like, I'm supposed to be here, so it was cool. It was awesome, so yeah.
Yeah. All right. And what is, you mentioned your Air Force pick. Do you have more picks coming up? What's next in the whiskey world or otherwise for you?
So I got some things that I'm kind of looking into, kind of sharpening my steel, see if what I can get into. I want to definitely do a little more content, but I have a podcast coming out with another friend in whiskey. His screen name Whiskey and JoJo, but a lot of people know Brody Whitlock. And so we have a podcast that's coming out. It's going to be called Cask and Cipher. So it's going to be, it's not just bourbon based, it's spirits based, but it's a little more investigative. A lot of things that people, kind of wanted to know, didn't know. We got some good guests so far that we've already interviewed. So, but it's not necessarily guest super focused, but you'll see the concept when it comes up. It's pretty awesome actually. So.
Okay. Yeah, you might have to get in that content bag a little bit more if that's the plan. All right, cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, cool. And we always like to, end the interview with something fun. Previous seasons, we asked everyone the same question. I'm mixing up this year, just because I'm feeling a little more villainous. So I will ask you to either ask me for either a song or a whiskey. Is part one of the question. So you'd have to give me a whiskey or give me a song.
Give you a whiskey or give you a song?
Yes. Give me an artist.
Yeah, we're trying to
give me an artist.
Give you a whiskey and give you an artist. Okay.
One or the other.
Then I'm going to say Kendrick Lamar.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So if we're talking about Kendrick's recent release, his very topical recent feature on the Metro Boomin Feature.
Yes,
album.
I like that.
Okay. What is the whiskey you would pair with like that? And why?
It's just Big Me. If it's just Big Me, I would say if I was doing it am I doing it as one of my picks or am I doing it as just a whiskey in general?
Just a whiskey in general. I'm gonna make it easy. Just a whiskey in general. Let the category be open.
Ooh, okay. All right. I would say, I know you're probably gonna think it's a weird selection, but I've been liking this. It's a Bardstown collab they did with Ferrand.
Okay.
And so I feel like that was very limited. It was kind of slept on, but it's amazing. So I would say the Bardstown Bourbon Company collab with Ferrand Cognac. It was awesome.
Definitely out of the ordinary, a little left of center. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well,
I like
as
that.
always, thank you so much for taking out the time. I really appreciate it. We've been friends for a hot minute. Where can people find you, follow you? Just give them all the additional information if they want to know more about you.
Awesome. So I'm Kymberli Douglas, and I'm on Instagram at Kimmy5964 on Instagram. And that's probably my primary social media at the time. So yeah. Awesome. But feel free to, hit me up, send me a message. I'm always accessible.
All right, cool. Well, cheers everybody. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks.